welcome back to the Integrate Intelligently podcast. I'm your host again, Jeff Brickler. Today I'm accompanied by, of course, founder and CEO of CADTALK, Scott Brickler, and with Brian Miller of SolutionsX. And today we're talking about the future of manufacturing with Infor CloudSuite and CADTALK. So CADTALK as an integration platform integrates CAD, PDM, and PLM systems with various ERP systems. Infor CloudSuite is one of those systems. And Brian is from a partner of ours called SolutionsX, and they sell and implement Infor CloudSuite. So Brian, welcome. We always bring these episodes out a bit with the hero's journey, right? So how did you come about your role at SolutionsX? How long you've been there? How'd you get into that sort of thing? And then we'll talk a bit more about manufacturing and Infor.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. And appreciate the invite here. Yeah. So my background is, 25 plus years in industrial manufacturing. So my background specifically is engineering by education. So I worked in the capital equipment business, specifically packaging machinery, similar to Scott and some of the other folks on the team. And so after a succession of role changes through operations and IT and kind of a little bit of a peppered background, decided to get into the ERP consulting space back around 2015. So coming up on 10 years, and really just made that change because I enjoyed, customers and seeing different environments and just learning different aspects of manufacturing, and really just wanted to help improve the manufacturing industry overall, right, through tools like ERP systems and specifically Sightline. So for about 5 years, I did full-time operational consulting, as well as some accounting side, but really given my background, operations was the focus, and then transitioned into a leadership role within SolutionsX. And now I work with the services team, the PMs, the functional consultants, developers, and to help deliver the product out to the industry. And we specialize in aerospace and defense, firearms manufacturing, chemical processing, capital equipment, given my background and several others on the team, and just industrial manufacturing in general.
Sometimes I have a bit of a complex when I'm on these calls because everybody's comes from an engineering background or a manufacturing background, and I kind of learned it secondhand. So no, that's really cool. So it's interesting that you as an engineer got interested in ERP, because my experience working with engineers is that they have absolutely no desire to be anywhere near an ERP system.
Yeah, that's probably true. My journey is a little different because I really got exposed to it as an administrator when I transitioned from engineering to operations. So probably around 2006, I moved from a mechanical design engineer role, designing capital equipment specifically, and took more of an operations role where I was over supply chain, inventory, IT, assembly, manufacturing, a little bit of everything there, right? Because that just looking for a change, and that interested me. And from that transition, then I inherited the administration of the ERP, right? I had been a user of Sightline specifically for not that long then, probably a year, and then took on the role. This was back in the days of version 6. For those familiar, we're on up to 10 now. So version 6 was probably penned in the mid to late 90s, and I was using it in probably the mid 2000s. And bringing that forward. So Progress databases, certainly on-premise servers, all that good stuff. So, going into the operations side and specifically supply chain and procurement, that dove me very deep into the bowels of the ERP, right? I had worked functionally on the item side, a lot of things that, CADTALK interfaces with, creating BOMs, creating sub-assemblies and so forth, and then transferring those manually into the system, which was, a manual process. We were using, at that location, we were using Autodesk Inventor. And so we had Inventor, some sort of PLM system from Autodesk. I don't remember the exact name of it back then, but we weren't leveraging any other tools. We were using it mainly for the Vault. I think that was the name at the time, Autodesk
Right.
Vault. And
still exists today.
Yeah. So the expansion in that then kind of exposed me to the finance side and some of the other things as well because of the administrative part of it.
So your story is a little different because a lot of times I hear what I hear when people get into ERP, like Scott and so many of our other guests, was that they were working at a company, manufacturing company, or just any company, and their company bought a new ERP, and someone got kind of co-opted, right? Or just like chosen, like, hey, you get in here and run this part of the project. And that person goes, well, I've never done it before. That's okay, get in there. And so that you're a little bit different in the sense that your company wasn't implementing new ERP. You already had it. This was more driven by you, right? That you wanted to get into operations, and as a result, yeah, you were just looking for that role. Okay, yeah, that's it's a little different from what we typically see, which is that you like willingly chose it. A lot of folks I talked to, it was thrust upon them, right? Like without any input from themselves. So you're a willing participant.
Yeah. I'm not sure I sought it out necessarily, but it did come with the job description.
Came with the gig.
Yeah.
Came with the gig.
And I had interacted with several other ERPs up to that point, right? Some smaller stuff like E2 Shop Tech and Mapex and some of those other tools. So I was familiar with systems like that. And then going forward from that role, I moved into a couple other positions at other companies that were, kind of progressively larger, but always had some component of system oversight to them.
Right. So I guess you've been working in manufacturing, what, 20 plus years now, 25 years, maybe 30?
95, yeah, so 30.
Oh, so yeah, 30 years next year. You've probably seen a lot of changes, right? Since you started 30 years ago. And now you've been working with, as you said, Infor CloudSuite Industrial, also called Sightline. Now you've been working with that for 10 years. Well, you've been working at SolutionsX for 10 years. I don't know how many years you had been working with the company, the manufacturing company with that same product. Kind of what have you seen? What's the evolution look like in terms of manufacturing and ERP? And it's like, so when you started, what did that look like? And then what have you seen happen? And then where's it going to go in the future?
Sure. So my first interaction with Sightline specifically was around 2006, 2007, that era. So it's coming up on 20 years for that as well. When I as mentioned, when I got into it, we were using a system that was about 10 years old at the time. So it was really kind of 30-year-old technology. So, user interface was completely different, although, ERPs kind of historically or typically don't evolve super rapidly when it comes to the UI and UX. That's a big topic with Infor at the moment. They're putting a lot of resources into changing that experience. But the upside to that is that the core engine of the software is really relatable, right? Even if you used it in 2007 or somewhere back in those days, you could probably pop in today if you were in a time machine and kind of find your way around and not be completely lost. So that was good. But back at that point, there wasn't much in the way of MES systems or things like Factory Track or Shop Track or any of those types of tools that maybe existed but weren't really readily available. Of course, everything at that point was on premise, so everything was hosted locally. Maybe you were on the verge of some single tenant stuff where, it was just your server was in another building and that somebody else managed. But it was still kind of dedicated to yourself. The multi-tenant cloud really didn't come to be a thing until probably 2010 to 2012 and really wasn't adapted until, the mid-teens on any sort of scale. But it was really just, basics and a lot of hand gathering of information, a lot of manual transaction entry and all of those things. But the mechanics of it, ironically, haven't really changed a whole lot. We're still doing job orders, we're still doing labor transactions, issuing materials, all that kind of stuff. It's just the experience has evolved, right? Things like the multi-tenant cloud, obviously the platforms have changed quite a bit. And now it's, when we have a customer that orders a new environment, within 2 days, we get an email and, hey, your environment's up. It used to be a month-long process of ordering servers and figuring out what version of Windows Server you needed and SQL and all those other things. And now it's just kind of press a button behind the curtain, so to speak, and all those things are deployed for you. So the platform certainly has evolved quite a bit. And then the interface, as I mentioned, has changed quite a bit, and it's moved the activity out to the point of use. In our case, we were building packaging machinery, case directors, case packers, tape machines, those sorts of things. So we're a lot of heavy mechanical manufacturing out on the shop floor. And, there was a lot of writing things down, time cards, what materials did I use, hand it to a guy in the stock room. He handed it to somebody in accounting. 2 days later, they entered it into the system, and there was just a lag and, the obvious risk and delay that comes with that. Whereas nowadays, everything's out at point of use, right? So if I'm working on a job out on the shop floor, I'm logging into the system. I'm saying start run, or whatever your button is. And now it's in real time, it's tracking those labor transactions. And if I use a material, I can issue that. Or, back flushing is similar, but now quantity completions can be done right on the fly. So how much did I do today? I can look at the end of the day and really know. So that was one transformation that I think was important. Another has been the expansion of other applications and the integration of those into the ERP space, right? So in Infor specifically, you've got Infor OS, right? Or Infor's operating service. And that's kind of looks and feels like Sightline when you're in the Sightline application, but it's a suite of products that allows you to kind of bounce back and forth within one environment to have that factory track or the shop floor execution piece, but also things like document management, right? So now when I'm out on the shop floor, I don't have a big, thick book of prints, which we used to do. There was a person whose job was just to create print packages, right? So you could print them out, take them out to the floor, and they'd write all over them or, spill coffee or whatever. You have to do it all over again. Now everything's kind of at your fingertips, right? So we have the ability to connect documentation to different areas of the software, and it automatically appears when you're working on those things, right? So that's fantastic. And then, workflow engines have evolved tremendously. Base ERPs, most of them have some sort of event system that can trigger things, but it takes a lot of development and work to get those things to operate. And now we're seeing things like the Ion workflows, where it's a graphical interface and more of a power user than a developer can set these things up in terms of hours or even minutes instead of days, of development work, which we know is costly and takes time to execute and is hard to change. So there's a lot of downsides to doing that sort of deep modifications, whereas now we can build that up into some of these workflow engines that exist with the packages today. So a lot of difference to the user experience, in the past 20 years.
Sounds like, we see this with kind of all technology, or even AI. It's like complex things get easier, right? Complex tasks, like you said, configuring the ERP or setting up the servers or setting up the event engine and those kind of workflows. Like basically over the last 20 plus years, all of those things got easier, more simple. Like people with less ability, like less training, right, can do that. You don't need to be a full-blown developer to modify the system. You don't need to be to have that, don't have to be a fully trained consultant to do those things. You can do a lot of those just right in the system much more easily. That's what it sounds like. Of course, the core functionality is the same, but the ease of use for the average person has gotten, as you said, closer to the point of use.
Yeah, absolutely. And the tools just keep getting more and more advanced, right? AI is the buzzword of the year, right? Mm-hmm. Perhaps the century. And it's the tool that everybody wants to use to leverage, that knowledge in the background and other things like RPA or repetitive process automation, where we have use cases. We were just talking about one yesterday with a customer that has a pretty in-depth and detailed BOM management and engineering change process. And when they change an aspect of a bill of material, it might affect 200 bills of material because that item is widespread across their product offering. And then maybe we're changing both the item and the quantity or something. So all of those things are kind of separate pieces. But when you add them up, all of a sudden, a simple ECN is 400 or 600 changes that need to be made. Well, they're not hard changes, right? But but the amount of effort to do that all manually is prohibitive, right? So then that drives people to find another solution, which is usually not as good of a solution as what's built into the software, right? So using some of these other tools allows us to automate those things and remove that barrier to using that baseline tool. and really improves the overall experience, the quality of the data. There's just a lot of payoffs using these new things we have at our disposal.
Tell me a bit more about the AI usage that you see. Kind of, I know it's the buzzword, right? But before that was machine learning. How do you see kind of AI and manufacturing, or at least from an Infor perspective?
Yeah, we're really, I think, a little bit on the forefront of this because there's, adoption in manufacturing, I think is probably one of the industries that's slower to adapt to some of these functionalities, right? Scott kind of smiles at that one because he's seen that from his experience as well. But it's really got an advantage if you can build out the models, right? So what most people don't really have an appreciation for is that you have to build out the information for the AI tools to be useful, right? So there's no magic button or hey Amazon or whatever that just automatically knows. Somebody is behind the curtain building out those things, right? So that it knows what to do. And so we've been successful in creating some small scale examples of things. But what's really the challenge, I think, is for people to open their minds up to understand where it could be useful for them, right? And find those use cases that they can apply. I think that's probably the biggest barrier at the moment. So
yeah, we had a similar conversation last week with a different partner, but the same thing was like the use cases, coming up with use cases that you could show the customer, like, here's a use case for AI that they could understand and see a value in.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be like around like making decisions about, typically would be a person making a decision or trying to aggregate data and having it like surface data to you, or assisting you in a decision that you might make at a given time and things like that, or like I think like at least that's what I've seen so far out there. I mean, are you seeing something similar, Brian? Kind of surfacing up decisions or making data more accessible, or automating a process it used to be a lot more manual, things like that we're seeing seems to be the use cases, but the use cases are definitely the limiting factor.
Yeah, and the ability to leverage the data that naturally gets created and stored within the ERP, right? So if you talk about maybe buying decisions and you have information in there from hopefully years of purchase history from either different vendors at different prices from different destinations, and for somebody to go through and do a detailed analysis on freight costs or something like that, it's really laborious, and a task that probably is beneficial, but the cost benefit analysis usually prevents it because nobody wants to spend 3 days looking at that. Well, the AI tool can really help out there because it takes away, again, that barrier of the heavy lifting to go do the research, because it can do that. But again, you've kind of built out the model or the data for that through your natural activity over the past 10 years or whatever your use of the software. So being able to layer the AI on top of your existing databases and your existing information systems is where things are going to kind of take off. And it's a little frustrating at the moment to not know exactly how to use it, but I think also an exciting time because those that start to figure it out are really going to take off in their productivity.
Like there's been a promise for years about like with ERP of like turning data into information and decision-making ability. And it seems like the AI is going to accelerate that more, because like I know business intelligence was a big thing about like pulling the data out and getting it into a reportable format so people can make better decisions. But that still was somewhat laborious, and you had to kind of know how to model the data and how to do these types of things in order to get to that point so it's the data, the harnessing the promise of ERP and all of the data that it collects seems to be getting more and more true as the tools are getting better, and AI seems to be another evolution in those tools, like where it can even help you build the models and help you make sense of it and use that data to make decisions. It's just that, like you mentioned though, that there's still some setup. There's still assembly still required on some of these things. So,
yeah, one of the things we talk about is we talk about all this data and collecting the data and all that is how much AI relies on the quality of that data, right? It's one of the things we talked about last week, I think, with one of our other partners was like we talked about that in CADTALK. It's like getting good quality, consistent data that you can, if you have use cases, right? If you don't have that quality data, you're not going to get good decisions.
Yeah, garbage in, garbage out, right? Just like
Yeah.
anything else. So we always say computers are stupid. They only know what you tell them, right? So if you tell them the wrong thing, then they're going to give you bad information.
Seems like with AI, that data becomes even more important. I mean, it's always been important, but even more so, because now it's an abstraction layer. Because like before, you put data in the ERP, someone still might get good reports out. But I feel like I listened to a podcast this morning with Mark Andreessen. He's a venture capitalist out in the in Silicon Valley, and talked about like how AI is just going to be another layer on top of technology, right? And then like humans will begin to like not interface with the actual data at all. They'll just be getting kind of the assessment from an AI perspective. His conversation was more concerns around bias, right? Bias and the models and that sort of thing. It was a larger concerns that he was having about, training AI models, but it still goes down to the fundamentals of like the quality of the data and what the data says, and what the AI is so critical for the AI model, and that you won't even have access to that data anymore. You'll be just interacting with the AI model, and that AI model won't surface up that the data is unreliable.
Yeah, you're taking that human aspect out of it, right? So there's a little bit of apprehension, and I'm sure a lot of people are very nervous about that. We've all seen the pictures on Facebook or social media of the AI generated images that have, feet for hands or something silly like that, because it just doesn't quite get it right all the time. And there's no filter there that has human intelligence to recognize that that's a foot, not a hand, right?
Right.
So there's definitely some work to do. It's not the magic pill, right? And it's not the easy button that we all hope for it is, but it certainly helps out, right? And I know I use things like ChatGPT to really optimize information, right? You do a little bit of legwork, and you still have to have some intelligent inputs, but it can do a lot of the massaging for you and really optimize things and save a lot of time. You just have to use it properly, right? You have to know when to use it and when not to, right? What you have to put in and versus what you don't. Because I've seen instances and heard stories where the AI tools will purposely influence or point you very decidedly in a direction that anyone would know is wrong, right? Because it wants to confirm what you're asking.
Right.
So, that's maybe down a little bit of a hole. But, Scott, you mentioned something earlier about reporting, and I think that's a huge opportunity for the AI tools once they get advanced enough, right? BI tools are a huge topic right now in the space. And data and getting information in a usable format is really the golden ticket here, right? So if we can get to a point where we can just literally speak and tell the system what type of report we want and the information we want it to pull out of the database and all of that cleanly, that will be super impactful to the market, because right now, development of reports is costly and time consuming and hard to change, and all those things I mentioned earlier when I was talking about the workflows, right? All of those things apply to the reporting side as well. Getting good information out easily is a game changer.
You still need that critical thinking to make sure that it's telling you the truth. But other than that, but the automation of the kind of redundant steps or the heavy lifting part of it is still is nice to have that. You can move so much faster. That's where the efficiency comes from. But when it tells you that things that just don't make any sense, you still have to have the wherewithal to know this doesn't make any sense and to be able to dig in. So
now, Brian, talk a little bit about the Infor ecosystem. Like CADTALK is part of that Infor ecosystem, but also part of many other ecosystems. But talk a little bit about like how do other products, CADTALK included, how do they enhance the Infor Sightline or CloudSuite Industrial product? Because I mean, ERPs can't do everything. They can't fulfill every need, even though they want to, right? Everybody wants to have the solution that fills everybody's need, right? There are a lot of times there are areas where the doesn't make sense or it's not a core competency of the system. So talk a little bit about that ecosystem, the Infor ecosystem. What's the value of of those other products, CADTALK included.
Sure.
How do you approach those and the need for those for customers?
Yeah, sure. I would say the biggest change over the last 5 years or so has been the shift from system modifications, deep system modifications, to integrations. Right? As APIs have evolved over the last several years and become much more bountiful and easy to use, we no longer have to decide how to make the ERP do the thing that this other tool does better by modifying it. We can just use that other tool and tie into it. So it's still some work, right? But it's different work, and it's something that's much lower risk, because as things all evolve into cloud environments and automated updates and SaaS models and all of those things, ability to stay as close to core product as possible is key. So in the past, perhaps, to go down the CADTALK path, maybe you've had a process for importing data from an external PLM system or something like that, and that would involve creating different fields to contain information and custom IDOs and perhaps table structures and all of those things. And while we have the ability and the knowledge to do that correctly, it's much easier just to now decide to integrate to that tool, allow it to do its thing in its own space, and just take away the information that you need and automate that process. Now, when we do a periodic uplift of the ERP software or any component within the cloud suite, then it's much, much more stable and likely to not cause any issues, right? And all we're doing now is communicating back and forth along this highway rather than modifying the core functionality.
Yeah,
so
one of the things,
the CAD tools and other areas like CRMs and marketing tools and all sorts of things.
Yeah, I guess that's the kind of two different approaches by ERP that I've seen. Is like either you try to be include everything in that ERP, or the kind of, as you talked about, like the integration and the ability to make it easy for other systems to do what they do best, because it's hard to be everything to everyone. And it's hard to fulfill every role really well, right? You can't do everything amazing, no matter how much we want to or how hard we try. So allowing each software solution to shine and do the thing that it does really well, and then allow softwares like CADTALK or other solutions that tie in using those APIs and kind of offloading that work. You don't need to customize the solution to handle that. Just to keep it all in one system. Now, I guess the downside of that is you have to learn more systems maybe, but it makes it in a lot of ways, makes it a whole lot easier to, like you said, keep current on your ERP, to upgrade, to manage it, all of that scenario.
Yeah, and it allows flexibility to choose the best tool available, right? Because like you said, nobody does everything the best, right? So you want the best ERP and the best CAD integration and the best CAD system, right?
Right.
And maybe the best CRM, right? Maybe that's Salesforce, or it's HubSpot, or it's whatever. Maybe it's Infor CRM. But it allows you to select the right tool for your application and be less dependent on having to make accommodations because of some other aspect of the tool, right? So maybe the ERP has a great quality module, and so that drives you a certain direction. You don't have to have that as a limiting factor on your CAD integration selection.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. So getting back to a little bit about, SolutionsX and what you do, tell us a little bit about, you worked, as you said, you are now, you're an operations specialist, but you were a consultant for a long time. Talk a bit about the SolutionsX approach to implementing customers. How has that evolved? How has your role shaped that? What does that look like?
Yeah, so SolutionsX's implementation methodology is I'll say a transformation or evolution of Infor's deployment method, or IDM is the acronym they use there. And so it's a 5-stage implementation process, right? And a lot of the ERP companies, frankly, use a similar process, but they move some of the pieces around, right? And so what we've found is for our niche customers, which are, manufacturing companies in our preferred verticals, anywhere from probably 50 to $500 million in revenue, right? There's certain aspects of the projects that just fit well with a certain flow, right? So Infor has cool names for the stages like inception and elaboration and all of those things. And we follow that along. But really, it's about discovering how the tool can best meet the requirements for your business while also guiding the customer in their journey to understand how their business can best fit into the tool as well, right? Because people want to buy the new thing and play with it, but ultimately they want to make it do what they were doing yesterday. And that's not always the right thing to do. We want them to take advantage of the new tool, right? Because, these projects are large, they're disruptive, they're expensive. Those are all the negatives, but the positives are you can really transform your business. And we focus on, process management and process re-engineering where appropriate, right? Everywhere that everyone's worked, I'm sure you've had because we've always done it that way, right? Or when you really drill down into a specific process that doesn't really seem to make sense, you usually find that nobody really knows why they do it that way. Right, because the person that made that decision, retired 10 years ago, or it was, death by 1,000 cuts of accommodations that you made along the way, right? Which now are no longer relevant because the tool sets have changed. So, it's the difference between just going out and reading help screens on how to enter a customer order or how to enter a PO or ship an order, those types of things. The mechanics of that stuff is fine. You can learn that from YouTube videos. But the value is really the business knowledge, right? Understanding from our experience how all of the pieces work together. So that was kind of my shtick when I was the consultant. Was I had a really good handle on how all of the pieces affected the other areas of the business. And that's super important to understand because it helps guide the right decisions at the right time. Because if you go in parallel paths through 5 pillars and then only come together at the end, you're going to find you probably made some of the wrong decisions along the way. So we integrate that into our implementation methodology and we find it to be very successful.
How long does a typical project last for you? I mean, I know it depends on size, right? Like you might have a multi-site environment with, locations across the world, that sort of thing. But,
we would say, generically 6 to 24 months realistically. It's probably more like 12 to 18 months for most projects, right? And that would be anywhere from, consulting effort of 1,000 to 1,200 hours to 3,000 or 4,000 hours, right? And so there's a lot of factors in there. Of course, the breadth of what you're using in the software, because one of the cool things now with all the SaaS offerings is they usually throw in the kitchen sink, right? So stuff you used to have to pay extra for that you probably wouldn't have in the past, you get for free now. So it's just a matter of using it. Quality control modules, service management modules, things that were bolt-ons before are now provided with the software. So that's one aspect. And then two, just the size of the organization and complexity, right? So we have folks that we have one implementation and this is a edge case, but on the small side, they've got like 10 users in the ERP, right? And, it's not a startup company, but it's a relatively small business. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we've got a customer that has 27 different sites in the ERP, which represent locations on, I think it's 4 different continents, right? And so all over the globe, 4 or 5 of those are manufacturing, obviously several sales and distribution sites, but just a combination of things. So, that project, they're on the edges of the spectrum, but that one took several years to complete because, you also have to figure out how you're going to roll that out, right? It's hard to flip a switch on a global company like that. So you have to figure out a strategy of who's going first and then second and, how you're going to incorporate and live in the meantime, right? Because you're going to have people on either 2 different systems or best case scenario, 2 different versions of the same system in some way, and you're going to have to manage that. So in that latter case that I mentioned, they were on different platforms. Now they were both on Sightline, but different versions, different platforms, meaning one was SaaS, one was on-premise, And the on-premise world, they had 4 different separate instances, even though they said they were all on Sightline, right? So everybody had a different item structure. Everybody had a different way to enter customer orders. And when we got them all in the same room, they started throwing mud across the table at each other, trying to figure out who was going to be the one to lead the way. So, those types of projects can add some real complexity. But in the end, they really took advantage of the streamlining of the tools, right? Because even though they were on the same ERP system in the past, they were operating very differently. And that was causing a lot of extra effort.
So, Brian, every year there's an annual conference that comes up, what's called the Sun Conference, the Sightline User Network Conference, and that's coming up in February. So tell us a little bit about, CADTALK always attends and usually has a sponsorship, you have a booth and meet customers and partners like SolutionsX. Tell us a little bit about how does SolutionsX show up at that type of conference, and are you going to have a booth, or what do you do with those types of things?
Sure. Yeah. So we of course have been involved with the Sightline User Network in their conference for many, many years. Our involvement has grown as our business has over the years. So we are attending with a booth this year. So as part of the channel partner network, you don't really compete for business, right? So at a user network, you're not trying to find new customers. But there's 2 reasons that we have a presence there. And one is because just brand recognition, right? Some folks just want to be there and see your name on the table and the billboards. But 2, we have a products division that now has product offerings for the Sightline space, and those we're able to share with the entire community. So it's a great spot for us to get recognition out there. Additionally, we also always have a content session. So our approach, some of those at these conferences can be kind of sales pitchy. We don't take that approach. We'd rather deliver some content. And then, at the end, we have 5 minutes on, hey, come see us at our booth if you'd like to learn a little bit more about A, B, or C. So last year, for instance, Joey Himes, our solution consultant, did a fantastic session on some of the Ion workflows and the AP automation tools that he's built out. And so we'll have something similar to that this year. I don't know if the schedules come out yet to know what day and time that is. Similar to yourselves, I know you guys are always there, and you have a content session as well. So it's always a great event. It's kind of the premier Sightline event of the year for sure. And so we're looking forward to spending some time. And it's always in a good spot, right? This year it's in LA, somewhere out there by Disney.
By Disney. Yeah, by Disney. Yeah. That's good. Okay, Brian, let's just kind of wrap it up. Anything else that you have on your horizons or your plans, and that the audience should know about?
Well, we're always developing new tools. We're working on actively getting those out onto places where they can be distributed. Infor has its own marketplace. There's a few others out there as well from some of the other channel partners. And then, of course, we market directly to our groups. We've had the luxury and the pleasure of selling some of our largest projects over the last 12 months in 2024. And several of those larger projects have included things like robotic process automation and some of the other advanced tools. So we're not only implementing those projects, but also starting to build out content for use, right? So one of the things that typically falls short out there is when the publishers release some of these tools is the content or use cases behind them, and they rely on the partner networks to build that out. So we're excited to be a part of that. We participate in quite a few Infor advisory councils, and we're happy to be on the forefront and helping shape the product.
Okay, Brian. So if listeners want to get in contact with you in terms of just want to hear more about the Infor product, or they want to hear a bit more about your products, or even just connect with you, what's the best way to connect with SolutionsX and Brian Miller?
Yeah, so as everybody does, we have a million ways to connect. The most generic is info@solutionsx.com. But if you're looking to get to me, if you have a question about specific content, brian.miller@solutionsx.com. Of course, out there on LinkedIn and all of the other usual platforms. So you're welcome to reach out directly, or work through the team if you're looking for some information on projects.
Well, Brian, it's been a great conversation. I like talking to our partners. I mean, I work a lot with our partners, various ERPs. Of course, CADTALK is always trying to stay neutral in those conversations. We really, goal is to help our partners and help our partners help their customers. So it's good having a conversation with you today about the Infor CloudSuite Industrial, also known as Sightline, and hearing about your methodologies and what you're doing. And I'm really excited about the growth that you have. So really, again, thank you very much. Thanks everybody for listening. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel and subscribe to the podcast. And if you have any desire to reach out to Brian, you can connect with him on LinkedIn and through solutionsx.com and through the email. Of course, please feel free to drop by cadtalk.com as well, or reach out to me or Scott. No, just leave a comment about what you heard today and future topics. Scott, anything else to wrap it up?
No, I think it's a great overview, like great discussion around, the different, the core infrastructure. I've been around that for quite a long time. So it's always cool to see it, continue to evolve and continue to grow, and looking forward to the Sun Conference this year. It's going to be fun. Thank you.